Hello everyone and a very good morning. My name is Annalisa and I'll be your host for this webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us to discuss transforming teaching quality with flexible online training and Epigeum's University Teaching Core Skills collaboration. We should be taking about 45 minutes of your time today, including an opportunity for a designated questions and answer session at the end. So firstly, just a couple of introductions. We're joined today by Professor David Boud and Tessa Dagley, and I'll let them introduce themselves now, beginning with David.
Oh, hello. I'm very pleased to, I can't see you or hear you yet, but I hope that might happen later. Thank you.
Hello everyone, yes, I'm Tessa Dagley and I'm an Associate Commissioning Editor at Epigeum. I look after our teaching programmes and I will be working closely with David on the University Teaching Core Skills programme.
Thanks both, and I'm Annie. I'm the Product Manager for University Teaching Core Skills at Epigeum, and I work in the marketing team to help universities promote our courses internally. So just a quick look at the agenda before we get started. First we'll look at Epigeum itself. We're the organisation that put together transformative online courses through a unique collaborative model. Then we'll move on to David's presentation, who will tell us more about the context of university teaching, how we change it and how we prepare for it. And then following this, Tessa will provide an overview of Epigeum's interactive online toolkit for university teaching staff and also a brief demonstration of one of our existing courses. We'll then wrap up with a Q&A session. As I mentioned in the beginning, please do feel free to type up your questions as we go along. We really like to have that interaction with you. So in the right-hand side as the webinar progresses. So a quick overview of Epigeum. We were founded in 2005 as a spin-out originally from Imperial College London. Our two founders created the company in response to what they felt was a lack of timely support for researchers. And they saw this as an opportunity to work with universities to create accessible and interactive supported materials for researchers. Over the years, we've expanded to courses for students and teaching and leadership programs for staff. We were acquired by Oxford University Press 2 years ago and are a division of Oxford University, so we're a non-for-profit organisation in a higher education context. We've created over 92 online courses across 23 different programs and currently have a number in development. So we're an increasingly globally focused organisation and have worked with over 260 universities across 30 different countries worldwide. And this is a map to show you the international spread of universities using our courses. So I'd just like to show you a short video now to give you a visual introduction to our course development process.
The story of an Epigeum course. We come up with an idea and we consult widely to develop and fine-tune it. We commission a team of expert authors to write it and a team of expert reviewers to help them. We commission a lead advisor who gives strategic vision and leadership. And we bring together a team of universities who form a development group to give feedback on our plans and prototypes and to make sure the product meets their needs. The collaborations we build are drawn from across the world and often involve input from over 50 academics, as well as our team of in-house specialists. Because we believe that collaboration and iteration are the key to producing truly innovative and effective products. So we bring everyone together for a launch workshop at the start of each project. It's a great mixing pot where the creative juices can flow and expertise can be shared. We provide a week-long training course for our writing team to make sure they're able to get the best out of the online medium. And we provide plenty of opportunities for sampling and feedback along the way through a detailed peer review process. In fact, a typical product goes through at least 5 iterations before it's ready to be built by our in-house developers. Together, we're more than the sum of our parts, and our unique and rigorous product development process gives all collaborators access to groundbreaking courses they couldn't have created alone.
Okay, so just cutting off there. So to summarise the content of the video you've seen, there's a couple bullet points here. Our collaborations form a development group of universities which come together and share their experience at a workshop to help us create a really high quality online course. We recruit authors all under the guidance of a lead advisor, in this case Professor David Boud. And then the advisory team we put in place lead and shape the vision for the programme alongside our team. We've got a meticulous review process which allows the development group to look at the content of the courses, check that it matches their expectations and peer review the material. And the development group of universities are the early adopters who get to use the material when it's first published and implement the courses at their universities. So I'd briefly like to touch on implementation here, which is how the course can be used at your institution, and this can be in a number of different ways. Firstly, it can be used as a standalone course. You can supply the participants with online course immediately at the time and place they need it. And secondly, we have the option for tutor-supported online courses. And finally, it can be used as part of a blended learning program. And typically how this works is that participants are given access to the online course ahead of a workshop, and then the workshop would really focus on consolidation and application of the material. And they can also be implemented in all three modes at once. So hopefully that's given you a bit of background to Epigeum and how we put our courses together. I'd be happy to take any questions on that process, but first I'd like to hear a little bit about more of the audience perspective. So we have a few polls that we'd just like to ask you. So here's the first poll here. How prepared did you or other staff you know feel when first starting teaching role in higher education? So I'll just give you a few seconds to fill that in, and then we'll have a look at the results. Okay, so it looks like we have a mix of results. So 38% said quite, 46% said not very, and 15% said not at all. Okay, and we've got a second poll here, following on from that. What do you think are the biggest challenges impacting teaching in your institution today? So we've got a few answers here and also other, so it'd be interesting to see what you'll think. Okay, fantastic. So it looks like 43% think workload, 36% think the changing nature of student population, 7% think the TEF, and 14% think other. So that's really interesting. So that leads nicely into David's presentation, which is Changing University Teaching, How We Prepare for It. So I'll hand over to David now.
Okay, thank you. I'm very pleased to be involved in this. I was a reviewer of one of the Epigeum earlier courses in this general area, and I found their process, very impressive in terms of getting a really good quality program out of it. What I'd like to do today is just to talk a bit about the perspective of where we've come from and where we're going in both the way university teaching is changing and how we prepare for it. Just want to say something briefly about myself, then about changing university teaching, look at staff development and how we equip staff for teaching challenges, and finally what some of the issues are that we face now. I'm not going to go through all this, but what it indicates is that I've been around in this space for quite a bit of time, adopting many of the different roles in academic development in one way or another, and also coming outside academic development to be what you might call a normal staff member, doing various things, designing courses, managing my colleagues, and so on and so forth. And all that's ended up to my present position, in which I'm heading up a research centre on assessment and digital learning in higher education. So I've escaped from the immediate pressures of academic development for a moment. Well, where have we come from? I mean, when I started, university teaching consisted of lectures, and depending on what discipline you're in, you have tutorials or laboratory work. And over that period of time, just about every single thing has changed, although for some curious reason, we still regard the lecture plus tutor plus lab as the kind of iconic view of what university teachers do. I think the main thing that's impacting on us is this change in student population. They've got a much wider range of educational backgrounds, a much wider range of experiences in study. They come from different cultures, different countries, and they're as diverse as you can get. Well, maybe not. One of the things that strikes me in the UK, visiting the UK quite frequently, is how much less diverse your student population is than the one I'm used to in Australia. The other thing that we've seen changing a lot is the modes of teaching. It used to be taken for granted that university teaching involved people face-to-face in a room, a lecture theatre, a tutorial room, a laboratory, or whatever. But over time, increasing online elements have been added to that. So it would be very hard to conceive of a course nowadays that didn't have some of those components. But we're also seeing what we're calling blended learning, in which there's kind of seamless integration of face-to-face and online activities in a way that's designed for the whole thing to work together. The other big shift, and this has been creeping up on us quite slowly, I think, and we're only finally starting to realise the implications of it, is the shift away from teaching to learning, and more recently to the shift towards thinking about outcomes in terms of learning outcomes rather than subject content specific outcomes. We still have the latter, but we're much more focused now on what is it that the student will benefit from by undertaking a particular course. And that's a bit of a sleeper. I think we're going to see a lot more of the implications of that, and not just lip service to learning outcomes. The other thing we're seeing is the range of different kinds of media that people use just as a normal, everyday process of teaching. We see web-based components in all sorts of different ways, within lectures, outside lectures. We're also seeing a much greater use of players other than the tutor and the lecturer. We're seeing much greater use of peers. We're seeing much greater use of people in the community or practitioners in the profession beyond the course. And of course, the bit that's happening without us seeing it is all the social media that's going on with our students that we don't know what they're saying about us. And this is having quite a profound influence behind the scenes. Some people try to piggyback on that, and sometimes they're not a welcome player at the party. So if that was the change in university teaching, we've also seen alongside that changes in staff development for teaching. Now, the common assumption used to be, well, if you've got a research training, if you've got a PhD, well, this obviously and immediately equips you to be a university teacher. Now, the process whereby someone that had studied a particular topic in depth over a considerable period of time enabled them to teach others was always rather mysterious, and it still remains mysterious. And there's lots of assumptions about the wonderful things that PhDs do. Some of my recent research suggests that they're not even a very good training for research, and they're certainly not a good training for university teaching, despite the fact that they're now more diverse and includes all sorts of components to equip doctoral students on a much wider front than their particular specialist project. So very early on we saw short induction workshops, tips for teachers. This will help you survive when you're meeting your class for the first time. That developed over a period of time to quite extensive series of workshops and seminars. And back in the 80s, we were running a very, very large array of these things at the University of New South Wales when I worked there then. That then morphed into not just the kind of the one-off random take it or leave it workshop series, but to consolidate these in a formal qualification. Now, I'm using the Australian terminology here, but you have equivalent programs here in the UK in which basically you do a short qualification to qualify you as a higher education teacher. Now, of course, these are always and have been much shorter than qualifying teachers in any other environment. Quite why we need so much less isn't terribly clear. The other big shift that occurred is the recognition that people teach within particular social contexts, they teach within departments, they teach within course teams, so that just taking somebody out from that environment, working with them and then putting them back in itself can develop some of their ideas, but it all has to land within the local context. So we've also been seeing a whole lot of local developments going alongside that. And in more recent times, we've seen a diversification into what you might call portfolio-based approaches, in which academics, university teachers of various kinds, put together in a portfolio representations of the various things that they do and they understand about teaching and learning for various kinds of recognition. So just to summarise some of these shifts over time, one of them is from what we might call correct teacher behaviour, and that is characterised by one of my former Vice-Chancellors saying to me, you're the chap that teaches them to stop mumbling in their beards and write clearly on the blackboard. So there's that conception that all it is a matter of training people to perform in front of others. Two, the notion that it's all about student learning. So what we do is less important than what students do, and we need to understand what we do in terms of the effects on student learning. Huge shift, and we've still got further to go in that direction. We've also seen the shift from programs that were at a fixed point in time, at the beginning of the academic year, at various stages throughout it, face-to-face, to mixed modes. So we have a very diverse group of people, so we want to offer preparation at any time, online, at the convenience of the person concerned. And again, we're seeing this shift from centralised provisions in which the central teaching and learning unit did everything, to a notion in which they need to do some things, but also it's very important to develop people in their own context and local activities to suit the needs, not just of the department, but the particular course and the particular course unit that somebody's involved in. That at the end of the day, all this preparation needs to focus on what it's preparation for, which is to support a particular group of students in their particular learning journey. So, what do we need to think about in terms of equipping staff for the teaching challenges? Now, I've always been preoccupied by this first question. Now, we are, par eminence, the organisation that accredits professions throughout the world. Every profession other than university teaching requires probably some university qualification. So why are we the only unprofessional one? Still a mystery, and whilst there's some movement on that front, it's still up in the air. So the PhD was never enough, and despite all these reforms, the Roberts reforms, it still is insufficient. We know a quick orientation is not enough, and we know now that to be effective in university teaching, we need to be able to both understand and act good practices in particular situations. And it's not just a matter of knowing about practices, it's a matter of being able to do them for oneself. And all this leads to the notion that we need programs to support various kinds of university teaching that are flexible and they respond to a very, very wide range of contexts in which people operate. And it isn't just the lecturer or the tutor or something else. We're seeing all sorts of other teaching roles appear that contribute to our students' learning. Not just in the library, not just in IT areas, but in very, very many diverse contexts. And of course, we're recognising that these little initial programs in the early years are quite small and they need to be a pathway to other things. So the tips of teachers, survival in your first classes is no longer enough. It's building a foundation for a much deeper understanding that we need to look at now. So here are some of the issues that I think we face now. We have this extraordinary diversity in roles. The one thing that is becoming clearer and clearer is that we don't know what a teacher in higher education is anymore, because there are various ways, many ways of enacting that. People have different position descriptions. Some of them are academic, some of them are not academic. Some of them are held by professional staff. Some of them are full-time, some of them are part-time. So how do we cope with this extraordinary diversity of people and roles? How do we cope with what we're facing now? And I think we're seeing more of it in Australia than the UK, but I can't imagine that you won't see more of it in the future. And that is this extraordinarily high proportion of casualised staff. And by casualised staff, I don't mean PhD students taking on a bit of tutoring. I mean courses that absolutely require, because we can't afford to run them otherwise, large coteries of part-time sessional personnel that come in for a limited number of hours each week. Or in fact, they don't often come in. They do their work wherever it is needed. Because we're seeing not just the pathway to university teaching through the full-time academic with a teaching and research role, because we're seeing all sorts of other parties involved, we need to have programs and qualifications that recognise these people want some recognition of what they've been doing so they can take it elsewhere, so they can apply for other positions in other institutions. So for example, in Sydney, where I live, it's quite common for people to put together a workload consisting of teaching in 2 or 3 universities. And to do that, they need recognition of their teaching skills and what they've done to develop themselves. But we're not just facing a future with more casual staff. We're facing a future in which we need some staff with an extraordinarily sophisticated level of educational understanding to design courses that are extremely effective. And this is something which I think has been enormously neglected in our present discussions. We're starting to get to grips with the initial training side of things, but we're not coming to grips with the development of very sophisticated educational design expertise. So, to sum it up, I think we need multiple solutions for multiple purposes. So there's a need for everyone that has an educational role to be equipped for it. And I think there's 2 forms of equipping them. There's a generic equipping them, so they understand students and how they learn, so they can access high quality resources and literature, so they have a repertoire of things that they can do that's beyond just telling. And also, everyone needs to have some kind of contextual equipment, and that is they need to understand what the particular part of a particular course unit they're involved in seeks to do, how the learning outcomes need to be fostered, how they can collaborate with other staff within their department and across the program more generally. So we need the general and the particular. But most importantly of all now, we need to have programs that do some of these things that are available at any time of the year, any time of the day, in any location, at any pace, in a convenient set of parts. And it's extremely difficult for any one institution to do all that. We have extremely large universities in Australia, but none of them can do all the things that are needed on this front, no matter how well staffed they are. And some of them are very well staffed indeed. So we need to supplement whatever we do within our own institution with other resources, and to use those other resources as a pathway to other things, internally, externally, and for the future. Thus, one of the things we're talking about today is the Epigeum program on university teaching. Thank you very much for that, and please, if you have any questions, please post them.
So I've seen a few questions come through actually, David. Firstly, one saying research training should undoubtedly lay the foundation for you to develop your teaching capacity. Is this not the case?
Oh, okay. I absolutely agree that if we're going to employ a full-time academic, they need to be equipped in research. But the reality is that huge numbers of people that are in front of our students right now have not that background sufficiently, and that we need to equip them. Clearly, if somebody is going on a career path in a university, that's an absolute, and I have no argument against that. They do need a foundation in their discipline, but that clearly is just not enough.
Great, thank you. And there's another question. The current landscape is now that many university teachers have to qualify in higher education teaching. Therefore, is teaching not our profession then?
It's an increasing trend that people need qualifications, but it is as yet not a universal trend. We are still the tardy profession. So yes, we're slowly getting there, but I'm not sure that we're taking it quite seriously enough compared with other professions.
Okay, thanks very much, David. So before we move on to Tessa's presentation, we've got one final poll for the audience. We want to find a bit more about your current institutional context and kind of what resources you're using. So I'll just bring that up now. So what teaching support provision does your institution currently use? Is it online? Is it face-to-face? Is it a mixture, or is it nothing at all at the moment? Okay, so it looks like not 0% just use online, 8% use about face-to-face, just face-to-face, 92% use a mixture, so that's really interesting. And 0% said none. So now I'll move on to Tessa's presentation. She'll talk more about our university teaching core skills collaboration.
Yes, thank you very much, Annie, and thank you, David. So that's interesting, the results of the poll. That leads me neatly into explaining our offering. We are offering a flexible, interactive, online teaching toolkit to help staff develop the necessary skills to teach effectively and support students with confidence within the current higher education environment. We are planning to have our launch workshop in February 2018, and we then intend to publish a year later in February 2019. So why are we thinking about developing this online tool? Now, as I'm sure you are all aware, the increasing marketisation of higher education means that there is pressure on universities to take their teaching seriously. The expansion of HE providers, rising student numbers, none of this will be new to you. But it is clear that students want a return on investment. And not only do they want better support from an academic point of view, but they do expect broader guidance. So I think it's fair to say that the role of the teacher is much more rounded than in the past. Students expect to be provided with the skills that will stand them in good stead after university, and they are more likely to seek pastoral support. Educators should learn about how to involve students in the teaching process, how to work with them as partners, how to embed employability into sessions, and how to address mental health issues, because these are likely issues that teachers will face. Next, in the third row, the rise of benchmarking and global comparability. So there is growing pressure on universities, as I'm sure you're all aware, to demonstrate, measure and quantify teaching quality. This is particularly evident with the TEF, but not just with the TEF, also looking beyond the UK, the Australian University Teaching Criteria and Standards Framework is used by some institutions, and we have the UK Professional Standards Framework as well, which provides a very neat structure. So there is this demand for universal comparability, so universities and staff know where they stand in the global marketplace. As teaching becomes a more benchmarked factor, it will become more important to demonstrate an evidence commitment to teaching quality, and a strong foundation in teaching and learning is key. So who is University Teaching Core Skills? Who is it for? This is essentially a foundation programme. It will be aimed at all new, early career or less experienced higher education staff with teaching or learning support responsibilities. So for institutions using the UK PSF, this aligns to the D1 category, and it encompasses both full and part-time staff. So there are increasing numbers of sessional staff. Visiting faculty, including experts from industry, graduate teaching assistants, PhD students, lab demonstrators, seminar leaders, and administrative staff too. So essentially we want to provide a resource that can help academic and non-academic teachers. So anybody who has to teach either as the primary function of their role or as a secondary function. But we don't want to limit it to just this level. I think being a flexible toolkit, it will also be very useful for more experienced staff who might want to review the programme to refresh their knowledge and skills. You have already met David in this webinar, and so we're very lucky and very pleased to have him on board as the lead advisor. He will be heading our expert advisor panel, who will be overseeing the whole project and making sure that we stay on track, that we're covering the right topics, that we are going in the right direction. So he will also be working with Professor Kevin Ashford-Rowe, Director of the Learning and Teaching Centre at the Australian Catholic University, and Dr. Rosalind Hughes, Principal Teaching Fellow at the Arena Centre for Research-Based Education at UCL. The advisors will also be helping us to guide the authors once we have them on board too. Okay, moving on to the actual content. So here's an outline of the programme. We propose to have an introduction module. So this will be the start of what will be quite a unique, again, very flexible structure, which will allow participants to easily dip in and dip out of themes according to their needs. So we'll have the introduction, which will bring in the overview themes, and also we'd like to include a diagnostic tool within this introduction to help participants to think about the areas in which they feel confident or competent already, and the areas in which they need further training and further guidance. This will help guide which of the modules in the following strands follow. So after the introduction module, we'll have 6 key strands reflecting the logical progression of teaching: designing, developing, facilitating and delivering, assessing, supporting, and finally evaluating. Now each strand will contain a suite of modules, bite-sized chunks, which can be taken in any order or in isolation. And equally, the strands can be accessed in any order depending on your needs. This slide and the following one just show a fuller overview. So I've already covered what is included in the introduction. I'll just quickly go through this. So in the designing strand, we will be exploring how to design effective face-to-face online and blended teaching and learning to suit institutional requirements, student needs and developments in the field, while also ensuring that students are equipped with the skills they need for post-university life. Following this, we'll have a developing strand in which the modules will cover how to boost face-to-face online and blended learning experiences, particularly by promoting active learning and by involving students in the teaching process. And we will also cover how to provide engaging, high-quality learning resources. The next strand, facilitating and delivering, will probably be one of the most meaty strands. In it, we will look at how to select and implement diverse teaching approaches and how to create comfortable learning environments in large groups, small group and one-to-one and specialist settings. So the specialist and non-traditional settings will include labs in the field, and we'll also be discussing at the workshop whether we need to cover any other particular areas. In the following slide, we just look at the next 3 strands. So there, in assessing, we will look at designing appropriate and aligned assessments, delivering meaningful feedback on individual and group assignments, and minimising bias in marking. The penultimate strand, supporting, this relates back to something I mentioned in the earlier slide about the teaching role being much more holistic. So we think it's very important to look at how to support students both academically and non-academically. But also, it's also very important to think about self-care as a teacher, as a staff member. There are inevitable challenges and pressures, especially as staff members and institutions are more accountable in the past for student learning. So how to navigate these stresses, we'll be providing some advice. And in the final strand, evaluating, we will be examining how to adapt practice in light of peer, student and external feedback, and how to build on experiences as a reflective, inquisitive and proactive teacher. So how to set milestones and how to progress down certain pathways. So all in all, the learning outcomes that we propose. University teaching core skills will enable staff to identify implications of current scholarship, quality standards and professional values for teaching responsibilities, to design and implement appropriate methods of teaching and assessment within their scope of practice, to create supportive learning environments according to student needs, to explore opportunities to work with students as partners in current contexts, to navigate common non-academic responsibilities and issues that may arise in their own contexts, to identify specific opportunities that online and blended learning affords in their sessions or courses, and finally to demonstrate reflective teaching via evaluating practice and identifying and implementing improvements. The benefit of building this online resource is that we can really be very creative and set many diverse ways of conveying information, diverse opportunities for practicing skills. And so just to run through some of the key course features, we'll be including case studies and best practice examples throughout. So really providing plenty of opportunity to learn from peers and to prompt reflection and discussion. We will be inserting scenario-based activities to give staff, again, the opportunity to apply knowledge in realistic situations. Now, these scenarios could be either text-based or in the form of comic strips or in audio activities. Really, we can explore different ways. I mentioned before the self-diagnostic tool that we'd like to insert into the introduction strand. Again, we want to be as helpful as possible, so we want participants to be able to decide what exactly they need to know and which screens will be most beneficial for them. We know everybody is very, very busy, so the more direct the learning, the better. We will also be integrating our impact toolset to allow institutions to gather participant data and to measure and benchmark the quality and effectiveness of the online training. And we will have additional downloadable documents and templates that will be embedded into the screens that again provide further chance for reflection and engagement. And in my demo that's coming up, I'll point to how this might appear on screen. So the key benefits. Much of this is covered already, but essentially there are 4 key benefits to the UTCS programme. Firstly, it's the comprehensive coverage. I've covered everything that we're going to be exploring, but we will be looking at scholarship practices, standards, values, and frameworks such as the UK PSF. So it'll be highly comprehensive. And not only will it be comprehensive, it will be in one place, a single entity, which will be very flexible. This will ensure that all staff, whether they come from non-academic or part-time backgrounds, all staff will have access to the same level of training. There'll be consistency, and it will complement any existing in-house resources, allowing trainers or teaching and learning departments to concentrate on more in-depth advanced face-to-face support, or to perhaps take an online element from this programme and explore it further in a face-to-face workshop. Thirdly, the content will be high quality and will have a sophisticated pedagogy developed under the guidance of our panel of experts to promote high levels of engagement. And fourthly, and again, I've said this again, so I won't repeat it too much, but it will encourage staff to think holistically about their roles. So this brings me on to the demonstration. Okay, so I'll be showing you a couple of screens from one of our existing programs entitled Blended Learning, which was published in 2016. Typical features that will appear and which are very likely to appear in the UTCS program too. So starting with this screen, this is in the very first course of the Blended Learning Suite. Typically, we have a key takeaway or learning outcome at the top of the screen, so here. And we also have an estimated duration, here 10 minutes, so that users have an idea of how long it might take to complete a screen. Scrolling down, you'll see there are two parts to the screen. We have a core part here and the right-hand side here. Now in the right-hand side, we include little clickable boxes that we call pods, which contain material that complements the core content of the screen. So in this case, we have two useful advice pods. And further down, there's a video pod containing an interview in which academics talk about blended learning. And also a portfolio activity. So this is the additional downloadable document that I mentioned. Participants can choose to download this activity in an attached Word document template. Pods might also include key terms to define or your context, so a prompt for you to look at, I don't know, a particular department within your university for guidance. Going back to the main part of the screen. So this screen introduces the concept of substitution. So this is not simply adding new technologies, pedagogical approaches to your course, but substituting some of your existing approaches for new ones. The activity we have in the middle here is an animation. Now I'll just attempt to play a little bit of it for you to see.
I used to teach in a traditional way. Over the course of a semester, I usually have one lecture and one tutorial a week. But once I started a more blended approach, the structure of my course became more flexible. You can see from the design that in weeks 3 and 9, I decided to replace my traditional lecture with a short 20-minute video clip, and then offer a 30-minute webinar.
Okay, every video and audio in our courses will have a transcript underneath. You can access it here, and it's worth pointing out actually that every screen will have a text print version that can be accessed at the top here. Once users have watched this animation, they can then complete a note-making activity as shown here. So we've got a couple of questions. You can fill in your answer here and view feedback before moving on to the next question. Now I'll just take you to another screen for a couple more examples. So here the pod is a useful links pod. We have these throughout our courses. Again, they are places which contain information complementing the core content. We specifically put useful web links, which are all collated also in a resource bank at the very end of each course. Now on this screen we've got a labelled graphic activity. Users click on each pinpoint to find out more about, in this case, constructive alignment. And then there's an opinions activity. We have these again scattered throughout our programs, and this isn't a real situation, but we are using it to present a case. So 2 different opinions about course design. Sometimes these opinions are audio. And finally, the interactive activity at the bottom of the screen is a ranking activity. So users are meant to read the different statements and rank them in the order in which they think they should be considered. So you drag and drop. This particular activity doesn't have any correct answers, but another ranking activity might, and in which case you'd be able to see our suggested answers at the top with the button. So that's a very brief demonstration, but I hope it has given you an idea of the kind of elements that we offer in the online course. There are plenty of creative opportunities, and these are something that we will also be discussing once we actually launch the project at the workshop. I think that's all from me, Annie. Thank you very much. If anybody does have any questions, please do write them in the text box.
Thanks very much, Tessa. So just moving on now to the Q&A at the end. So if anyone has any questions on any of the presentations throughout the webinar, please do write them in the questions box now and we'll happily answer them for you. Tessa and David, I've got one come through here. Learning environments can be innovative, but most people are still giving lectures. What can we do to encourage more varied teaching? Would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the variation in teaching is creeping up on us. Most of the institutions I've been in where varied teaching has come in, it's been through some kind of initiative, a move towards blended learning, a move towards flipped classrooms, and so on and so forth. So I think people will respond to the environment and the circumstances they face. I'm not one that, argues that people should just change what they do for the sake of it when there's no good reason for doing so. So I think one of the things we have to kind of piggyback on is what these good reasons are to change. And by and large, the affordances of the digital environment is one of the impetuses we're seeing a lot of in various ways, encouraging us to change right now.
Thanks very much. And another one here, is it hard to get staff involved in teaching development? Do you have any suggestions? And how can an online course encourage development?
One of the things that we need to do with our provision is to ensure that it is actually relevant for people's needs. They need to know that by participating in these activities, there is some payoff for them. And I think the payoff has to be both immediate and long-term, so that it does help them deal with the problems they face right now, and they have an opportunity to kind of discuss the things that they're facing. But also we need to do it in such a way that we're building their capacity to be more sophisticated over time. And the online environment is just a mechanism for us doing that in a convenient way, because it's very hard to structure it otherwise in face-to-face activities alone.
If I could just add to that very quickly, I think one of the main things that's come out in my own market research and talking to different universities, staff have so much to do all the time, and that this was pointed out in the poll as well. The workload is huge and staff are time poor. So an online course just gives that extra flexibility. You can just maybe do it 10 minutes a day, access a screen when you need to, which I do think is very helpful.
Thanks both. Okay, I'm just moving on to the final slide while the last few questions come in. On my screen now you can see our contact details, and some of you may have already been in touch with us regarding to our University Teaching Course Skills collaboration. We can give you a lot more detail in regards to pricing and timescales for the collaboration, so please do get in touch with us if you have any questions. We'll also be able to provide you with the trial of one of our existing courses if you'd like to get a feel for how they look and function. I haven't seen any other questions come in, so I think we can end the webinar there, but thank you very much for attending this webinar today. Thanks to David and Tessa, and I hope you all have a good rest of the day, and we look forward to hearing from you. So thanks very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.